Yeah, I was just saying it's no end of pleasure to speak with you, Stewart
Ah,
Blackburn.
how absolutely delightful, Lynn. It's always a pleasure to speak with you as well.
And I love that you're in the jungle on the island of Hawaii and you have a virtual backdrop of your actual background.
My actual garden, that's right. And in fact, when you were interviewing me 3 years ago, was that? 3
3 years.
years ago now. Okay. So this is the view you had if you look to your right while we were doing that.
Yeah, it was a beautiful spot. We'll have to put a link to one of those videos so people can
Oh,
see.
yeah, right. Sure. Yeah,
Well,
good.
yeah, we thought it was time. It's been a little while since we had a chat, so we thought it'd be fun to get together.
Well, I'm delighted. I'm always delighted to talk with you. Uh,
Well,
and
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead. No, I was just going to ask a social question about how you're doing, but I assume that even though you look warm, um, it is mid-January in Canada, and it can't be that warm.
No, it's not that warm. I was just about to ask you how you were doing too. So I'm doing fine. And you?
Well, it's a rainy day, but it's the temperature is up in around 80, and it's very pleasant, and I'm doing just great. Um, I am at my age and place in life, if you will. Um, I'm delighted to not be having a whole lot of social interaction. So I'm very sorry about all the suffering, all the illness, all the deaths of those who are dealing with the virus. Um, but for me, social isolating is just great. So,
Yeah.
no.
Well, I think as you indicate, there's a real variety of experience of what's going on right now, and I think a lot of people are really enjoying not commuting and not having to go to social gatherings that they don't want to. I think we might be finding a new way to live.
I think so too. I think it's very likely. Uh, and which, in spite of all the pain, is nice to see benefits coming from all of this
Mm,
turmoil.
yeah. No, it's a definitely a time of turmoil. Well, let's see how we can. I thought, some of the things we can talk about today are some of them are timeless and some of them are timely, perhaps in just how we approach them, right?
Absolutely. So let's deal with time or the lack thereof.
Yeah, dive into a black hole of living where there's no reference points, and we can just consider ourselves home. Because
Hmm.
that's a lot of what you talk about, and I'll just mention your books. If the person listening to us right now has not met you before, you have two books: The Skills of Pleasure, Crafting the Life You Want, and
Right.
yeah, and that was the first one that I saw. And then It's Time to Come Home. With kindness and compassion, we come back to ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, and you call yourself a writer and a teacher, and you're doing healing and teaching from your practice of healing and teaching in the jungle at your home, probably remotely, fairly now in the jungle, remote in the jungle.
For the
And,
most part.
yeah, and yeah, and you've written lots of. Well, you're probably writing a new book, right?
I am in the midst of a new book. Right.
Yeah, and you've also written lots of dozens of articles on shamanism and pleasure and consciousness. And
Right.
you've I've got it right so far. And you've transitioned uh, from being a professional chef with a master's degree in food science to helping us and yourself, I'm sure, in the process of finding our way home and finding out what's really going on.
I couldn't agree with you more.
I appreciate the notes. So, so yeah, pleasure comes up a lot for you. I mean, you're the shaman of pleasure, is your,
Right. And let me be clear. I know that pleasure um, is largely associated in people's minds with sex.
right.
And for those people who are uncomfortable, uh, at least in some ways, with sexuality or other people's sexuality or whatever, um, pleasure then becomes somewhat suspect. But the important thing I think to remember is that it is our way of knowing that we are in alignment with our inner self or our higher being or our soul, however you want to put it. So I think it's important to recognize that pleasure is a very important part of um, our tool chest, if you will. I mean, pleasure is the measure of success, and it is how we know when we're aligned or when we're out of alignment. If we feel good, we're in alignment. If we're feeling bad, then we're out of alignment. It's a very simple system, but pleasure is an important part of how we go about, and of course it motivates everything that we do. Everything. We want to feel better. We're not always successful, and we make a lot of choices that don't make us feel better, but it is the motivation for every choice we make. So until we understand the importance of pleasure, how it's an important nutrient and how it is essential to our well-being, um, if we miss that, then we miss out on life. So, and in terms of manifesting the life you want, you have to be able to enjoy the anticipation of pleasure or the pleasure of anticipation in order to really focus on what it is that you want. So without understanding how pleasure works, we're handicapped to a huge degree.
Yeah, well, you make a good point. I mean, it is a big motivator. I think sometimes of people who are depressed or um, feeling quite downtrodden for whatever reason in their relationships, and I wonder what helps them get up and get going in the day. Like you must find pockets of pleasure, right? In
Well,
How does that work, do you think? Like if you're feeling pretty bad anyway, how do you find those pockets of pleasure and how do they find you?
um, so the first thing to recognize, I think, Lynn, is that our feelings are primarily derived from our thoughts.
Hmm.
So when we understand the connection between what we're thinking and how we're feeling and pay attention to that connection, um, whenever we feel bad, oh, what am I thinking? Oh, I'm paying attention to the news, or I keep blaming my parents for not doing things right for me, or my girlfriend slash boyfriend, um, you know, has abandoned me or abused me or whatever it is. These thoughts make us feel bad. It's the thoughts that make us feel bad. And so we have to go back and say, okay, if I am focusing on things that make me feel bad, the most natural thing to do is then to change my focus and to start focusing on other things. So let's take grief as an example.
Okay.
A lot of people will feel bad and unhappy in the throes of grief. And yes, you have to feel all of your feelings, but you don't have to um, uh, keep feeling those things or keep creating those feelings with your thoughts. So if you keep thinking that you miss that person and that person is gone for whatever unfair reason there is, you've got a lot of thoughts that make you feel bad. At the point that you can say, okay, things have changed now, haven't they? I now recognize that my world is not the same as it was. I know that that person's gone. I'm grateful for all the wonderful times I had with that person, but that time is over. Now I must turn my attention, my focus, to the new things that are coming into my life, the things that will bring me joy. And it is that very powerful choice to move the focus to the things of joy coming that allows people then to feel strong and enabled to move on with their lives in a successful way.
So it's important. Okay, so there's sort of a mixture there. I mean, you want to focus, but you on other things and on the new things and on the things that are feeling better, rather than dwell on the past and things that don't feel good. So, but you're also distracting yourself, and distraction is okay. Is that you're still dealing with the feelings though? I'm just trying to get clear on the distraction.
And so let's, in its simplest form, it's very important to accept what's going on right now.
Right.
And that's essential. So you can feel what's going on right now and be aware of what's going on right now. But at the same time, you can say, but that's not how I want things to be. I want things to be different. You can have those two thoughts simultaneously. And as you put more and more attention and focus into how you want things to be, things will change.
Yeah, I think so. But you have, well, not but, and I'm just thinking of in terms of a relationship dynamic that is not ideal to me. In a not a like a romantic relationship, but with somebody, I feel kind of caught up. Like I feel like I'm the one that has, well, I feel like we probably both have feelings that aren't fully resolved, and so we get tangled up with each other. So I would like it to feel better, and I'm taking it from my sense of what you said is that I can focus on the good things about it and the good things in my life and just allow things to unfold, not try to force it, because I can't change anybody else's, actions.
You don't want to. You want to change your own energy.
Right.
So easiest way to do that is to compliment. Even silently compliment the other person changes the energy. You change one end of a relationship, the other end has to change. I mean, it's
Sure.
very simple.
Yeah.
So you want to change how you are reacting to the other person.
Right.
And so that is the decision. You're going to change your thoughts about the other person. And so you might say something like, I didn't like what they did. However, I want to feel good, and that's more important to me.
Right.
And so I will forgive them for what they did. That is to say, bring its intensity down and say, okay, that really doesn't matter that much. And I like the way they do such and such. That's your feelings at that moment then are likely to be much more positive and put you in a position to move on to other joys.
Yeah, and then by the time we come around to being in touch again, I've softened and I'm just enjoying my life better, which can only be better.
Yeah, right.
And then
they're very likely to respond to that.
Exactly. And then I can just feel more relaxed and not dependent. I came upon a list of codependence features the other day and I went, oh my God, I think I have to attend to some of this. Just being too concerned about how other people feel and are reacting. Now,
right.
you use the word manipulating energy with our thoughts and feelings. What do you mean by that exactly?
Sure. If we have a thought of how much we enjoy something, then our energy will change automatically. The more we think about loving somebody, our energy will change. We're creating our reality with our feelings, our thoughts and feelings. But the energy of our feelings is what is energizing the reality that we're experiencing. So we want to be very, very careful to keep our vibration, our energy, as high as possible, as positive as possible, because that's what we're creating with. So we do that with specific thoughts or actions or posture or music or things that we enjoy. But it is a matter of getting to the place where we are enjoying things or loving things or having fun, that we then can be as positive as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I had said, I mean, you didn't say manipulating, but it was something that you mentioned that we could talk about. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just wanted to sort of have a context for, because you hear the word manipulating or manipulated, and it sounds, intentional to change or to,
Well, as a chef, I'm used to manipulating food.
right.
If I'm going to make a loaf of bread, boy, am I going to manipulate that bread, dough. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with manipulation per se. I mean, we don't like to have other people manipulating us,
Yeah.
but that's us blaming them for choices that we have made, because anything that we do, we made a choice about it. So that whole manipulation thing is really a cop-out.
It's really a cop-out. That's a good point. So, so a lot of the work that you do is about connecting with the inner self and getting to know one's inner self.
Right. The first line on my website, very cleverly named, I think, www.stewartblackburn.com, is welcome to a magical world where love is the ethic, the inner world is seen to, the inner world is seen to create the outer world, and pleasure is the measure of success. So the more we understand our inner self and what's going on there, the more we can understand how we are creating the realities that we are experiencing. I mean, for years now, we've been saying we create our own reality, which is really nice, but what the heck does that mean? So we want to go in and find out what's going on inside of us so that we can see what it is that we're doing that's creating the experiences that we enjoy or not each day. So going into the inner world is to recognize that we are so much more than this physical reality that we are so enthralled with. And yet this outer world, this physical reality, is much less than the inner world that is doing all kinds of things, having all kinds of experiences, of which the physical self is part. That's not the only part. So the more we can understand basically who we are as a greater being, the happier we can be. So my intention is to help people discover more and more about who they are as spiritual beings, as soul, or as a greater entity, and learn the skills of being a full being. So that's my work at this point.
Well, I think people want to feel more alive, feel like they're getting more out of this experience while we're here, right?
Yes, absolutely. But I think it goes beyond that. When we talked about pleasure a moment ago, we were talking primarily about physical pleasures, emotional pleasures as well.
Yeah.
But there are also really great spiritual pleasures. And people who follow pleasure, who allow pleasure to teach them how to how to be masters of life, learn that each pleasure they have will come to an end. Either it naturally comes to an end, or we decide that it's not good enough. We become dissatisfied. And so the path is of going to successive pleasures, enjoying them, but seeing the dissatisfaction there, and then seeking higher and higher pleasures. Well, when you get up to the highest pleasures, you're dealing with the pleasures of the soul. And, there are lots of really great pleasures of the soul. Connection, for instance.
Yeah.
Or humor, actually. And peace. Peace is a fabulous pleasure. Harmony is a great pleasure. And these great pleasures are intense, but once you allow yourself to enjoy these pleasures, then you're enjoying, the best that there is. So I'm encouraging people to allow themselves to feel that intensity and get into the greatest pleasures of them all, of which there are many.
So is what you're describing spiritual awareness? Is that those high pleasures? Is that what that is?
Yeah, but spiritual awareness could also, be understanding the pleasure of going to the bathroom. So I'm not trying to make it anything that's unusually great. It is really just becoming more and more aware of who you are and enjoying everything from that perspective.
So, Stewart Blackburn, do you remember the first time that you realized that this was important to you?
This being
Sorry, this pursuit of pleasure.
a pleasure. Well, yeah, actually, I was a teenager, and I started realizing that everything was we didn't talk about it, but everything that we did was based on feeling good, on pleasure. And at that time, I remember at 18, I read the Tao Te Ching and the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, and kept on looking for, the greater pleasures. But and I took my own diversions and had other little stopovers in things that didn't seem to be contributing to my education, although clearly they were.
Yeah.
So it's a individual trail. We're each unique. Our own paths are different, and I've been. I didn't write about it. I didn't talk about it even until starting about 20 years ago.
I think a lot happened about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you that we're all on our individual paths, as far as, and of course we're all at different ages. Do you tune into the planets, the stars, configurations, eclipses, all that kind of thing at all?
Lynn, I come from the perspective that we create our own realities.
Apart from any other influences like that?
Uh-huh. So if I were to tune into the stars, then it would be I would be creating a system for myself that might work for me, might not, whatever, but it would be my own creation. And when you get into the inner world, you recognize that it is essentially subjective. There are some objective things about it, but most everything there is subjective. So as I look around, I mean, the world, the physical world, seems to be very objective. And yet, we know, even through physics, that essentially nothing's there. And we are creating the beauty that we look at by appreciating what it is that goes through the long, complicated process of light going through our lens to a flat surface and then being reassembled upside down into a three-dimensional image that so we think that we're seeing. So in any case, it's a very complicated process, most of which is filtered by how we look at the world and our rules of reality. So I look at any of those things and say, okay, if that works for you, that's great. But I'm more interested in how I'm going to create my reality and my experience here, as opposed to dealing with ideas about things that I can never experience. You know, I'll never really get up close to a black hole.
Right.
I don't care how much you tell me about its characteristics. That's not going to make my life happier. So I may be curious about these things, and I think that's great. But I'm also curious about how it is that I have made my left leg hurt, or whatever it is. So I take responsibility for how I'm experiencing things in my body, and there's an awful lot of work to be done there to figure out, what it is that I'm thinking that creates that pain.
Because it is connected, isn't it? Like you say, it's, I mean,
totally.
You're walking down the street and suddenly your ankle hurts when it wasn't hurting a minute before. And
Right.
so, yeah, it's really important to focus in and, well, what did I just think? Like you were saying earlier.
That's right. So what did I just think?
Mhm.
And if we can recognize that our experience is a function of the creation of that experience by the inner self. It happens in the inner self first. So we can watch what's going on. We can have the pain, go back, okay, what was I thinking? What's going on in my inner world that is creating that tension that shows up in my body? So there's a whole complicated world of factors in the inner world that go into creating our experience. Well, to me, that is far more exciting and fascinating than the black hole. Not to take away from those that love black holes.
Well, it's not just the black hole. I mean, there's little points of light and stuff too, but it, like you said,
Forgive me. Yes, you're absolutely right.
yeah, but I mean, like you say, it's closer to home, which is what it's all about. Well, so ultimately though, Stewart, what do you think, what do you think the ultimate home is? Like we're becoming as conscious and aware of the intricate nature of our inner and outer worlds while we're here on the planet. And then what? What does it help us going forward into our next adventure after this life?
Well, I'm making the assumption that it does.
Yeah, I think
As it happens, I don't have a lot of experience in that.
fair enough.
But I do recognize that when I get the experience and get the mastery of manipulating the energy so that I'm enjoying my life and helping other people do the same, then I probably will come to a point where I've finished with my lessons in physical reality. I have no doubt that there are many other realities, but that's an assumption that I choose to make. So, and I choose to believe that I will go on and have other exciting adventures in different realities, and I look forward to that. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to try and hurry up and finish with this one.
Yeah.
I'm just going to savor this one, and then when the time is done, go on to the next.
Yeah, I like what you say about manipulating your own energy because, I mean, ultimately, you're right. If any sense that you can blame somebody else for how you're feeling, like right away, if you can see that there's that kind of attitude or perception, then you know that there's some adjustment to be done on your own insight into what's just happened or how you're feeling.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, do you ever get a sense, or do you ever talk about that relationship with yourself like being your own best friend? Do you ever think about it that way?
Um, yes, I used to think of it in terms of being my own best friend. That is to say, my inner self.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where the inner and outer self, or ego, if you will, that is to say, sense of identity, start to merge. And when that happens, then it's, talking about my inner self being my own best friend doesn't have as much meaning because we're not separate.
Right. Good point.
So to me, that integration is what I would call home, at least in earthly terms. That's home to me. That place where I can feel comfortable being fully who I am as a multidimensional being, as a being that has an earthly life and a being that has a very pronounced and multi-level non-physical life. So, there's a whole lot more to me than I have ever been aware of consciously. That is to say, aware of it consciously from this perspective, from this earthly perspective. So I'm interested in seeing what else I can understand about who I am in the multifaceted, non-physical world.
Well, that's a good approach to being on the planet. So when you wake up in the morning, do you have a routine or an intention that you set? Do you have a way of being open to more insights, more awareness?
Well, Lynn, when I wake up in the morning, I have usually had a couple of 3-hour periods of sleep, um, uh, interrupted by an hour and a half to 2 hours of meditation.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so when I get up in the morning, I grab a cup of tea and go out into my garden.
Yeah,
This is what I was looking at this morning,
nice.
and sit there for about an hour and drink my tea and just sort of be with myself. So, I mean, you could think of it as a date. And so, I talk to myself about all kinds of things. And then I have breakfast. So I'm not sure that answers your question. I hope it does.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking of someone listening to our conversation um, and perhaps interested in having some information, ideas about how to shift things up a little bit.
Okay.
Because, like you, and sorry, I'll let you, I'll ask you to offer more of those ideas. I was just going to say that that we often can be very busy and not take that time to be still. There's different ways to do it. There's different ideas that we don't know how to do it, and because we don't practice it much to know the difference of, if it's a little busy or a lot busy, or what not busy at all is like. So for sure, what would you suggest?
Well, let's go back to pleasure. We started with pleasure, and that's where everything starts.
Right.
So, in order to have more pleasure in your life, you need to feel. Very simple. I mean, pleasure is a feeling. The more intensely you can feel your pleasure, then the more pleasure you have in your life. That's what savoring is. Savoring is the mindfulness of pleasure. Now, not all feelings are good. That is to say, they're not all pleasant. Nonetheless, we have to feel our feelings. If we don't feel our feelings, we shut them down, then we shut down our ability to feel good and feel anything. So we just feel our feelings. You know, if you your feelings can't hurt you, but resisting them can.
Right. That is such a
The first thing to do is to not resist your feelings. And if you feel your feelings, they will go away. That you feel them fully, they'll disappear. And you'll feel really good after you have felt those feelings. So in order to increase feeling good, we need to feel and be willing to feel. And some of those feelings are extremely intense. Okay. We have to learn how to deal with intensity. The idea of being overwhelmed is the experience of overwhelm, if you will, is the place where we see or we come to the limit of our tolerance for intensity. There's nothing magical or objectively real about that point of feeling overwhelmed. It's just how much tolerance we've got. Well, if we allow ourselves to become more tolerant of feelings, more tolerant of intensity, then we can feel more of the great things there are to feel. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, we're all after great feelings. So in order to get there, we have to learn how to deal with that intensity. Okay. So I would suggest that if people really want to feel good, they allow themselves the time it takes to process their feelings. I mean, that essentially is what sleep is about, or at least the nighttime period, is having a time set aside to process feelings. So if you wake up in the middle of the night, and you may find that, you know, you've got all sorts of thoughts about what's going on in the world, or thoughts of things that have happened during the day, well, you've got all these feelings about these things. Fine, that's a great time to feel your feelings. And if you allow yourself to feel those feelings, fine, they'll disappear. And you'll have other feelings that come up, fine, you let them come up and you feel them, fine, they'll disappear too. And that becomes a practice. That you generally, when you wake up in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning, you're in this wonderful hypnagogic state, or more technically hypnopompic state. But it's halfway between sleep and wakefulness. And this is a very important state of consciousness when you are not really aware of your body, but you are aware of what's going on in your inner world. That's the time to see what's going on and to make changes if you need to. And so I encourage people to take advantage of that time. Doesn't matter how long it is. I like, you know, an hour and a half to 2 hours, sometimes more. But you don't have to do that. Just whatever time you've got, whatever time you allow yourself to feel your feelings, because you'll feel better. I mean, it's that's the whole point. You know, meditation is wonderful if you enjoy it, if it's fun for you. If it's not fun, then you're not going to do it, and there's no point in forcing yourself. You're not going to get anywhere.
No,
you know, if it's not for fun or love, don't bother.
Yeah, well, no, you make a good point there about taking the time to feel the feelings, because I know that if I'm feeling uncomfortable about something and I notice that I'm breathing more shallow, in a more shallow way than I was, I know for sure I'm resisting some feeling. And I know I've noticed that if I have a cry first thing in the morning, I've learned that that means I'm going to feel fantastic by the rest, you know, into the day. Yeah. You know, you're clearing the way. But sometimes I remember talking to somebody years ago who said that they just didn't want to start feeling because they thought there would be no end to it.
And that person's absolutely right. There is no end to feeling. Thank goodness. Yeah, sure.
But again,
There's so many people. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that would be the tolerance for, the overwhelm tolerance factor. Because I mean, because I believe that once you, like how you were describing it, you go through a layer and you feel that, and then that dissipates, and then another comes up. And I know that when I've woken up in the night and I'm, like you very well described, there's all those feelings and thoughts, and included in that is, oh no, now I'm missing sleep and I'm going to be tired. But I often will just pull out my notebook and make a list starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like just write, okay, I'm going to write down every thought I can think of that's on my mind. And that really helps to just loosen up the congestion in there sometimes.
That's great. And I want to just go back to emphasize that our lives are primarily about feelings. All of our great thoughts are only useful to the degree that they allow us to, or help us to feel and to be comfortable with what it is that we're feeling. So if we're not going to be feeling, then why bother living?
Well, yeah, but maybe it's better to start feeling so you can get to living.
Yeah, well, it's obviously, yeah, it's essential.
Yeah. No, I mean, really, I guess sometimes you just don't want to feel, and then you don't really feel alive.
That's right. You deaden yourself.
Yeah.
And well, the issue then comes with pain.
What the what the
That
pain?
is to say, if you're feeling pain, if you're feeling hurt, or you're feeling angry, and you really don't like that feeling, and you don't know what to do with those feelings. My second book, It's Time to Come Home, with kindness and compassion, we come back to ourselves, was written with that sort of thing in mind. A lot of people hurt themselves tremendously by how they are looking at their lives. Basically, the things like shoulds, should nots, with disappointment, with expectations. All of these things are common ways of dealing with life that really do a great deal of damage. So I think that we need to understand that we are creating our own unhappiness, and it's totally unnecessary. But if we don't know how to not do it, then we need some help. So, and help is there, not just through me, it's available all over the place. But it's a matter of really learning to feel and understand how we are creating our feelings and how we can change.
Do you ever, thank you for that. Do you ever feel, I know you feel, so do you ever feel overwhelmed by the abundance of choices every day? There's so many choices we can make in what we do and what we think.
I wouldn't call it overwhelmed, but I do feel that I'm blown away by it.
Ah,
I'm amazed or awed, really. And I like awe. I think awe is a wonderful feeling. You start out with a little bit of curiosity, and then you start wondering about things, and then you just sort of experience the awe of whatever it is. It's a non-verbal kind of thing, just a big wow. And the more you can get into intensity, the more wow you can have.
so this intensity, I think often it it's a lot to take in that intensity. And so people want to tamp it down, with drugs or other substances. So what do you think is a good transition for recognizing that? Like I remember years ago, you know, people would say, "Oh, well, there's this whole other natural high you can have," but you don't always really believe that or get it or understand. Like that's how much fun could that be?
Yeah, really. Um, well, the first thing is people often equate intensity with pain. And so if that's true, and they naturally don't want pain, then they don't want intensity. And as a culture, we avoid intensity in general, except with certain movies. Actually, most movies have a fair bit of intensity to them these days. But that's a separate reality that we don't have to live in. But intensity, is something that you can build up to with things that you like. Chocolate is a great one. To enjoy the intensity of the pleasure of chocolate or ice cream, or any of the really fun things that we choose to eat. We allow ourselves to increase our tolerance of intensity with things that we enjoy. So savoring, I think, that's number 5 in my skills of pleasure. And it is a major skill. It may be the most important of them, although they're all really important. But savoring allows you to build up your comfort with intensity. And the more you can enjoy, just, think about love. If you can think about somebody you love and really allow that feeling to get very, very strong. And then when that feeling is very strong, let go of the image of the person you love and just focus on the love, the pleasure of loving somebody, or just love itself and the intensity of love, and allow yourself to just be in that love more and more intensely, bigger and bigger. You're always bigger than your feelings, but allow those feelings to get bigger. You will, in fact, get bigger yourself and increase your ability to handle intensity. So it's a matter of looking for intensity. Not all bad things. Not all intensities are bad things. There's all the great pleasures of the soul I referenced earlier. They're all intense. Peace. When you really get deep into peace, peace is very, very intense. Harmony is intense. Love obviously is, and all the things that you really want in your life are intense. Well, great. Okay, then allow yourself to experience that intensity. And in so doing, you'll become more comfortable with that intensity and be able to handle the other intensities like grief or loss in general, with ease and compassion for yourself. And, life gets a whole lot easier when you allow yourself to skillfully handle intensity.
Well, that was a great riff on that topic. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I find more and more I like to I don't call it, okay, now I'm meditating. I just find myself being quite at ease, naturally just being drawn to being still. Just
It's a pleasure, isn't it?
It's a pleasure. Yeah, there's no resistance. It's relaxed, it's comfortable, it's natural, it's just, wow, this is all I want to do right now,
Right. And it can get very intense.
Yes.
And it's an intense piece.
And that is a pleasure of the soul. And it is well worth cultivating. And I congratulate you on your skill at doing it.
Well, thank you. I will accept that as a skill rather than just a non-activity.
Oh, it's an activity, all right. It's a very, very important activity. Almost, you might even think of it as a sacred activity.
Uh-huh.
Sacred being a word that we use to denote something that's very important.
Yeah, very important. Not quite of the world.
But I guess, yeah,
I mean, it verges on that spiritual part.
you're right.
Well, we're just having a little moment of stillness right now. I mean, that's a good thing.
Let's savor it.
I'm just adding laughter to it to make it even more savorable.
Uh-huh. And it does.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Canada and you're on the big island of Hawaii in the jungle, and yet I can feel what it's like to be there because
You've been here.
I've been there.
Yeah. Very, very special. The volcano is erupting again.
Well, I did hear that there was some volcanic activity going on recently and wondered how that was affecting you. You're holding steady as before?
Well, yes, it's not, the lava is not flowing in my neighborhood the way it was before. And that's always a good thing.
Yes, although I remember sitting there in your garden with you and you very comfortably said that you are much more comfortable living on the edge of danger than not, and that's why you choose to live where you live.
That's right. That's right. There's an element of risk here, and I'm uncomfortable without some element of risk. There is a sense of being alive when there's risk. I mean, all the adventurers and daredevils and all of that, they do it because it feels so good. That feeling of being alive, and that's in part why I live here. That there is a risk. I like this risk a lot better than I like the risk of a hurricane in Miami, or the risk of major snowstorms in Maine and Newfoundland. I mean, everywhere's got risks, but you go for places that have risks that you like, and allow yourself to enjoy the risk that you've chosen.
Well, it's like it helps you to not take it for granted, the beauty and the peace.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, you can almost compare that to life being precious because it doesn't last forever.
It certainly helps to be reminded that that life is a pleasure that comes to an end. I remember one of my shamanic teachers talked about how you should always let death sit on your left shoulder to remind you that he's always there. And so enjoy the moment, enjoy the day, and don't take it for granted.
Well, and I have heard, can't give exact credit, but I've heard that the souls that either haven't been incarnated on Earth or maybe have been and perhaps would be wanting to come back are what would be the word? Aware that we have feelings that because of living on the earth. And so, you know, again, not to take for granted the feelings or think that they're our adversary or something, that they're actually something to explore and find pleasure in and enjoy while we have them, because there's a sense that um, that they, you know, our feelings can help guide us and direct us and um, demonstrate to us what we're thinking, what we're capable of experiencing.
Absolutely. And I would like to remind you that our feelings are our experience of energy.
Yeah.
Our experience of actually energy flowing, or not. I mean, when we block our energy, then we feel bad, and we feel good when we allow the energy to flow. So we're in terms of energy, and if we want to think in terms of energy, which I think is much more useful than philosophy. Philosophy gives you all sorts of reasons, but it doesn't really talk about what's going on. So if we think about the energy and allowing ourselves to feel our energy, be aware of our energy, then we are much more in a much better position, say, to work with that energy and skillfully use that energy to create the life that we want.
I like that. I like that word skillfully better than manipulating.
All right, fine. Then from now on, whenever I talk to you, I will use skillfully.
Thank you. Well, have we gone around the block, Stewart? Is there anything we're missing? A little point of light to include in our constellation of conversation?
I think we've pretty much covered it, Lynn. I would like to remind people that that energy that they are experiencing is what is creating the next experiences. And consequently, if you want to have more pleasurable experiences, then be mindful of what you are thinking and how you are feeling now, because that's what's going to create the next set of experiences. So it really behooves us to watch what we're thinking, pay attention to how our thinking affects our feelings, and doing what is necessary to bring our feelings up as high as we can. Boy, if we can do that, we're in much, much better shape.
Yeah, we got it. We got it then. Well, yeah, and I guess that makes me just remember that sometimes we think, well, when that happens, then I'll feel good, rather than I'll feel good and then that will happen.
That's right. That's
Feel
right.
good.
The feeling comes first.
Feeling comes first. Feeling good comes first. Yeah.
Yep.
Very good reminder. A timely reminder in this time.
A timeless thought that's a timely reminder.
Exactly. You just turned it around. That's right. Well, Stewart Blackburn at stewartblackburn.com. I thank you so much for tuning in from Hawaii.
Lynn, it's always fun to talk to you. I look forward to our next time.
Well, we will be in touch then.
Okay.
All right.
Very good.
Aloha.
Aloha.